There's a quiet kind of pain that deep thinkers carry, a burden not of the body, but of the soul. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't manifest in loud, dramatic outbursts that demand the world stop and take notice. Instead, it lingers silently, an invisible weight pressing down with the steady, unrelenting force of gravity. It is the specific anguish that comes from noticing too much, from hearing the dissonant chords beneath the melody of everyday life, from feeling the emotional currents that others steadfastly refuse to acknowledge. It is the pain of being a conscious observer in a world that seems to have chosen a comfortable, collective slumber. You have felt this. Imagine yourself at a dinner table, bathed in the warm, ambient glow of what is supposed to be connection and camaraderie. The conversation is effervescent, a cascade of light laughter and meaningless chatter that skims across the surface of existence like a stone skipping over water. Someone recounts a tedious anecdote about their commute, another shares the latest celebrity gossip, and a third offers a bland opinion on the weather. Everyone participates in this ritual. They nod, they smile, they play their designated parts in the unwritten script of social agreeability. The rhythm is predictable, safe, and utterly hollow. But then you speak. You feel a pull, an internal imperative to introduce something of substance into the void. You offer an observation that is real, a question that is honest, a thought that doesn't fit neatly into the pre-approved surface-level cadence they have so carefully constructed. And in that instant, the atmosphere shifts. It is almost imperceptible to others, but for you, it is as palpable as a sudden drop in temperature. Your words don't land. They hang in the air, dense and out of place. No one laughs. No one responds directly. There is a beat of unnerving silence. Someone shifts uncomfortably in their seat, another clears their throat with exaggerated importance, and a third quickly pivots, saying, "Anyway, did you see that game last night?" The moment is gone, but its ghost remains with you. You felt it, that small, sharp sting of rejection, that unspoken collective discomfort with your authenticity. This is not an isolated incident. It's a recurring pattern, a theme that has woven itself through the fabric of your life more often than you care to admit. You are the one who breaks the spell, and for that, you are met not with gratitude, but with a subtle, yet firm emotional exile. The brilliant psychoanalyst Carl Jung understood this phenomenon with profound clarity. He posited that the deeper an individual ventures into the labyrinth of their own mind, the more profoundly alienated they risk becoming from the world around them. This alienation is not a symptom of being broken or flawed. On the contrary, it arises because the collective world, for the most part, prefers illusion. It builds its foundations on comforting falsehoods and rewards those who conform, who blend in, who nod without questioning, and who master the art of pretending to be okay. Even when the very architecture of their inner world is collapsing, deep thinkers, however, are constitutionally incapable of this pretense. They cannot unsee what they have seen. Their curse and their gift is the ability to perceive the scaffolding behind the stage, to see through the fake smiles, the empty traditions, and the hollow systems that govern so much of human interaction. Jung once articulated this tragic dynamic with chilling precision. The more intelligent and self-aware a person is, the more they suffer from the general unconsciousness of society. This isn't a compliment meant to flatter the ego. It is a stark and sober warning. In a society that does not value, and in fact fears, psychological depth, being acutely self-aware is not a superpower. It is a profound and enduring affliction. This curse often takes root in the fertile soil of childhood. From an early age, most deep thinkers are fundamentally misunderstood. They are the children who ask the questions other kids don't think to ask. They relentlessly wonder why grown-ups so often lie, not just to others but to themselves. Why rules seem so arbitrary and are enforced with such baffling inconsistency. Why love, the supposed bedrock of existence, sometimes feels so painfully conditional. Instead of receiving genuine answers that honor their curiosity, they are met with dismissal and thinly veiled irritation. Don't ask so many questions. Just do as you're told. Why can't you just be like the other kids? And so, they learn. They learn to retreat into the silent sanctuary of their own minds. They learn to stop voicing the questions that burn within them, but the questions themselves never stop. They simply grow sharper, heavier, and more complex with each passing year. By the time they reach adulthood, they have constructed entire worlds inside their own consciousness. intricate landscapes filled with unspoken thoughts, unseen truths, and unexplored feelings. Yet the external world has no patience for such inner cartography. At work, they are instructed to follow scripts and adhere to protocols that defy logic. In relationships, they are told they are too intense or overthinking things. When they crave genuine intimacy over superficial romance, on social media, they are inundated with a relentless demand for toxic positivity. And so they learn to hide again, not out of a desire for deception, but as a mechanism for survival. They have learned through repeated, painful experience what happens when they reveal the true depth of their perception. Carl Jung believed that society at its core fears what it does not understand. And deep thinkers are a source of profound misunderstanding. When you articulate a complex, nuanced idea, people often perceive it as an arrogant display of intellectual superiority. When you sit comfortably in silence, content with your own thoughts, they assume you are sitting in judgment of them. When you dare to speak of trauma, grief, or the darker aspects of the human experience, they accuse you of being dramatic or morbid. When you ask probing questions, they defensively retort, "You're just overthinking it." But you are not overthinking. You are seeing clearly. You are observing the subtle details, the unspoken power dynamics, and the hidden motivations that others miss. You are feeling the emotional resonance of a situation that others are either unable or unwilling to feel. And this clarity, this depth of perception, makes people profoundly uncomfortable. It's not because you are wrong, but because you are right. You speak the truths that they have spent their entire lives actively avoiding. You bring a flicker of light to the shadowy corners of their psyche. They have kept boarded up and buried. You serve as a living, breathing reminder that something essential is missing from their lives. And that reminder is an unbearable pain. This is why you are so often met with resistance, mockery, or a sudden, inexplicable distance. You are rejected not because of who you are, but because of what you represent, a mirror to all that has been suppressed and denied. Jung called this the encounter with the shadow, and he knew that most people would do anything to avoid meeting their own. Consequently, they reject the person who reflects it back at them. That person is so often you. If you've ever walked through life feeling as though you were simply too much for the world, too intense, too sensitive, too questioning, too deep, you were not wrong. You were not broken, and you were not mistaken in your assessment. You were, in fact, correctly identifying a fundamental truth about the society you were born into. It was never designed to support the depth you carry. Carl Jung had a term for the cultural operating system that enforces this superficiality: mass-mindedness. It is the insidious idea that most people do not think independently. They do not venture into the wilderness of truth for themselves. Instead, they passively absorb the values, beliefs, and limitations that their culture hands to them, never stopping to question if those beliefs are real, if they are right, or if they are even theirs to begin with. From the moment you enter this world, you are handed a script. It is a comprehensive manual for an acceptable life. This script dictates what is good and what is bad, what success should look like, and what constitutes failure. You are taught to compete for status, to obey authority without question, to smile when you are sad, and to be nice even in the face of profound disrespect. It is a script of compliance, a blueprint for a predictable and manageable existence. And if you follow this script, the world applauds, pats you on the back, and calls you mature, successful, and well-adjusted. But if you dare to deviate, if you pause and ask, "Why are we doing this?" or state with quiet conviction, "This doesn't feel right to me," you suddenly become the problem. The system's defense mechanisms activate, and you are swiftly labeled. You are too sensitive. It's too intense, too negative, too difficult. But here is the secret that Jung knew in his bones. You are not to anything. You are simply awake, and the world is terrified of what an awakened mind might see. Let's go deeper and trace this back to its origins. Think about your earliest encounters with the education system. Was this a place that celebrated your innate curiosity, your capacity for creative thought, your emotional insight, or your philosophical ponderings? Or were you rewarded for conformity? Were the highest accolades reserved for memorizing the correct answers? For sitting perfectly still in your chair? For remaining silent even when something inside of you wanted to scream a question that would disrupt the lesson plan? For most deep thinkers, School is the first institution where they feel the suffocating weight of this enforced conformity. You are arranged in neat, orderly rows. You are told precisely what to think and when to speak. And your understanding of right and wrong is based not on empirical truth or moral resonance, but on the unquestionable word of authority. The unspoken lesson is clear. The world does not want you to think deeply. It wants you to follow. Followers are profitable. Followers are predictable. Followers do not disrupt the system. Carl Jung saw this with piercing clarity. He understood that any system that actively discourages inner exploration is a system built upon a foundation of fear. It is a fear of the unknown, a fear of inconvenient truths, and most of all, a profound fear of the untamed power of the human soul. That foundational fear inevitably hardens into culture. It becomes the very air we breathe. It dictates the way we date. Where surface-level attraction and shared hobbies are elevated above, the far more challenging work of emotional resonance and shared vulnerability, it becomes the way we work, where status, productivity, and profit margins are relentlessly prioritized over personal meaning, creative fulfillment, and a sense of purpose. It becomes the very rhythm of our lives, a frantic, endless cycle of rushing, chasing, and scrolling. A velocity deliberately engineered to prevent us from ever stopping to ask the most dangerous question of all. Is this even what I want? Jung believed that the soul is not meant to operate at the frantic, jarring speed of modern life. The soul in its essence requires space, silence, stillness, and an honest engagement with its own shadow. But these are the very things our culture seeks to eradicate. Stillness is rebranded as laziness. Silence is seen as awkward, and introspection is dismissed as unproductive navel-gazing. Yet deep thinkers do not just seek out this sacred space. Their very presence creates it. When a deep thinker walks into a room, they carry with them a certain palpable presence. It is a stillness that is not empty, but full. It is a gaze that does not just look, but truly sees, and people feel that. They feel seen perhaps for the first time in their lives. For those who have spent their entire existence hiding from themselves, being truly seen is a terrifying experience. It is an indictment of their own pretense. And so, they instinctively push the deep thinker away, not out of malice, but out of a desperate, primal act of self-protection. This is precisely why so many deep thinkers are unfairly labeled as loners, or weird, or intimidating. It is not because they are inherently antisocial, but because they live and breathe at a frequency that most people are not, and do not want to be tuned into. Carl Jung captured the heart of this pain when he wrote, "Loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." That line strikes a chord, doesn't it? Because you know its truth intimately. How many times have you found yourself in a conversation, yearning to talk about something real, about meaning, trauma, life, death, or purpose only to be met with a polite but firm redirection towards small talk? How many times have you seen straight through someone's carefully constructed mask but said nothing? Because you knew with absolute certainty that they could not handle the truth of being seen. How often have you had to dull your own light, to dilute your own thoughts, to make yourself smaller and more digestible just to be understood? That is not connection. That is a performance. And surviving in a world that does not understand or value depth comes at an immense cost. You begin to doubt your own sanity. Start to internalize the world's judgment, thinking, maybe I am the problem. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I should just stop thinking so much. But please, do not ever let them convince you of that. Because the moment you abandon your depth is the moment you abandon your soul. And Jung would never want that for you. He believed that the world's greatest and perhaps only hope lies in those few. Individuals brave enough to remain conscious in an unconscious society. Brave enough to keep questioning even when it brings them pain. Brave enough to stay awake even when the blissful ignorance of sleep looks so very tempting. You, with your heavy thoughts and your sensitive heart, are that hope. But let's be brutally honest. Being a deep thinker does not make your life easier. It makes it infinitely harder. You don't get to pretend. You don't get to lie to yourself. You don't get to ignore the dull, persistent ache in your chest when your life falls out of alignment with your soul. You are condemned to feel everything. The breathtaking beauty, the gut-wrenching tragedy, the deafening chaos, and the profound silence. And in a world that constantly tells you to numb yourself, to scroll past the pain, to move on and get over it, the simple act of feeling is an act of rebellion. So, rebel, if you are a deep thinker, there is a good chance you have walked through much of your life plagued by a question that feels both simple and impossibly complex. Why do I always feel so tired? This is unto the straightforward physical exhaustion that comes from a long day's work or a sleepless night. It is a deeper, more pervasive fatigue-awareness of the mind, a depletion of the spirit. You experience it when you enter a room and can immediately sense the unspoken tension hanging in the air, a static charge that no one else seems to notice. You feel it when you listen to someone speak. You don't just hear their words, you hear the aching pain behind them, the carefully curated omissions, the silent pleas they themselves are not even aware of. And somehow, by the end of that interaction, you feel as though the very air has been sucked from your lungs. They, however, feel better. They seem calmer, lighter, unburdened. And you are left alone, grappling with that familiar question. Why do people always come to me for support, but disappear the moment I need someone? Carl Jung had a name for this invisible, draining transaction, a combination of projection and a kind of unconscious vampirism. Let's unpack that, because understanding this mechanism is crucial to your survival. In psychological terms, projection is the act of unconsciously attributing one's own unresolved issues, repressed emotions, or undesirable traits onto another person. It is a defense mechanism that allows an individual to avoid confronting the parts of themselves they dislike or fear. And deep thinkers, with their innate empathy, their calm demeanor, and their self-aware presence, are like open canvases, perfect targets for this offloading of psychological weight. People feel instinctively safe projecting their chaos onto you because they sense you have the capacity to hold it without shattering. But herein lies the profound danger. When you are constantly, and often unknowingly, absorbing the emotional weight of others, you slowly begin to disappear. Your own thoughts become clouded by the static of their anxieties. Your own inner voice grows quieter, drowned out by the volume of their needs. Your own emotional landscape becomes blurry, overgrown with the weeds of their unresolved pain. And the most insidious part of this entire process is that no one notices. To the outside world, you are simply the strong one, the calm one, the one who always seems to have it all together. They see your stability not as something that requires protection and replenishment, but as an infinite resource to be drawn from. This is how the world drains deep thinkers. Silently, subtly, systematically. It is not through overt violence, but through a slow, creeping dependency that erodes your very sense of self.
Ow.
Over time, this dynamic poisons the well of human connection. Relationships become irrevocably one-sided. Conversations cease to be a mutual exchange and instead become unpaid, unacknowledged therapy sessions. Friendships devolve into a series of emotional rescue missions where you are perpetually the first responder. After a while, you begin to lose something vital, yourself. Carl Jung believed that the world doesn't just ignore deep thinkers, it actively uses them. People are intrinsically drawn to the light of depth, but they are also terrified of the heat it produces. So instead of learning to build their own fire, they seek to warm themselves by yours. They extract your insight. They consume your calm. They siphon your energy. But they rarely, if ever, give anything back in return. And so, inevitably, you reach a breaking point. You begin to pull away. You set a boundary. You say with a voice that might tremble from disuse, "I need space." And the reaction is swift and predictable. You are called selfish, or labeled as cold, distant, or aloof. The very people who used your depth as a utility are the first to condemn you for turning off the supply. But what they fail to see, what they are incapable of understanding, is that your silence is not rejection. It is an act of spiritual survival. You are not being cold. You are desperately trying to recharge. Being a conscious, feeling entity in an unconscious world is profoundly draining, especially when that world is meticulously designed to keep you distracted and depleted. Let's talk about the media you consume. The average person is exposed to thousands of advertisements and media messages every single day, each one carefully engineered with the singular, underlying message: you are not enough. Buy this product to fix your flaws, chase this ideal to find happiness, achieve this status to prove your worth. If you are a deep thinker, you see the manipulation with painful clarity. You notice how beauty is sold as a substitute for worth, how fear is weaponized to sell a false sense of safety, how human attention is hijacked and monetized rather than earned. But here is the trap. Even when you know it's a lie, the constant exposure still wears you down. Because deep thinkers do not just consume information, they process it, they analyze it, they deconstruct it, they internalize it. And that cognitive and emotional labor requires a staggering amount of energy, far more than most people realize. Even the seemingly passive act of scrolling through social media is an energetic drain for a deep thinker. Every curated post, every inflammatory headline, every perfectly filtered image triggers a cascade of reflection. It activates a stream of internal questions. Why is everyone performing a version of happiness they do and actually feel? Why does no one talk about the reality of grief, of shame, of fear? Why is authentic vulnerability so meticulously edited out of our digital lives as if it were a source of shame? Jung believed that the collective unconscious shapes a society more powerfully than any law or logic. And right now, our collective unconscious is deathly afraid of depth. Therefore, the systems we live within, from our schools to our media to our corporate structures, are designed to suppress it. They scream at you in 1,000 different ways. Don't slow down. Don't ask why. Don't sit with your sadness. Just keep going. But deep thinkers can't just keep going, not blindly, not without asking what any of it truly means. And so they pause, they reflect, they feel, and the world punishes them for it. In school, they are labeled as distracted or daydreamers. At work, they are seen as too philosophical and not productive enough. In relationships, they are told they are too intense or too emotional. But what they really are is real. And in a society built on performance and pretense, being real is a radical and exhausting act. There comes a moment in every deep thinker's life, quiet and often lonely crossroads, where they are forced to ask the ultimate question: is it worth it? Is it worth the burden of seeing what others refuse to see? Is it worth carrying thoughts that are too heavy to say out loud and feelings that are too vast for others to comprehend? Is it worth feeling this much, this deeply, in a world that rewards numbness, and so few seem to understand the language of your soul? Carl Jung believed that this moment of profound questioning is not a breakdown, it is a beginning. It is the sacred point of initiation. For it is here that you must make a choice, to shrink back into the comfortable illusion, and conform, or to expand fully into your truth, even if it means you must walk that path alone. The world will not ask you to choose your truth. In fact, it will beg you not to. It will dangle the promise of comfort in exchange for your silence. It will offer you praise for fitting in and reward your numbness with applause and acceptance. It will show you a million examples of people who chose the easier path and seem, on the surface, to be perfectly happy. But deep down, in the part of you that refuses to be silenced, you will know that kind of life isn't truly living. It is a carefully managed performance. It is survival. And survival is simply not enough for a soul like yours. You were born with a mind that refuses to be tamed, a heart that refuses to go numb, and a spirit that cannot pretend that the emperor is wearing clothes. That is not a weakness. That is not a flaw. That is your calling. Jung spoke of a unique task that each of us carries within us, a psychological destiny we are meant to fulfill. And the deeper the thinker, the more sacred the task. Not everyone is meant to journey inward, to willingly confront the shadow, to walk into the purifying fire of the self and emerge changed. But you are. And it is not a comfortable path. There is no map, there are no cheering crowds, and there is no clearly marked finish line. Some days you will feel hopelessly lost. On other days you will feel cursed by the very awareness you carry. But listen closely and listen with your heart. That feeling of emptiness that sometimes haunts you is not a sign of your failure. It is the sound of space being cleared. It is the fertile void where something greater is waiting to emerge. Because when you finally stop trying to be what the world expects of you, you begin the glorious, terrifying process of becoming who you truly are. And that is the moment your real life begins. Here is the secret they will never tell you. Deep thinkers are not here to be understood by the many. They are here to awaken the few. Perhaps your purpose is not to be liked by everyone. Perhaps you are meant to be a mirror, reflecting the forgotten truths, and showing people the parts of themselves they have been too afraid to see. Perhaps you are meant to speak the words that others are afraid to even think. And yes, this path often comes with a profound sense of solitude. But you must learn the critical distinction between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness is the pain of feeling unseen. Solitude is the power of finally seeing yourself. And when you do, when you truly finally see and accept yourself, you will stop chasing the world's approval. You will stop begging to be chosen for the team. You will stop bending your truth into a more digestible shape. You will realize with the force of a revelation that you were never too much. You were simply too real for a world that thrives on pretending. Jung believed that once we embrace our inner complexity, we become medicine for the world around us. This is not a grand, heroic, or public transformation. It happens in the quiet, almost invisible ways you move through life. It is in the way you listen so deeply that others feel heard for the first time. It is in the way you hold space for someone's pain without trying to fix it. It is in your simple, unwavering refusal to look away from what is true, even when it is difficult. You do not need to become a guru, write a best-selling book, or start a movement to fix the world. You only need to do one thing, and it is the most revolutionary act of all. You just need to stay awake. You need to honor your depth. You need to stop apologizing for the space you take up and the truth you embody. That authenticity in itself is a beacon. And slowly but surely, the right people will find you. They will be drawn to your light, not like moths to a flame, but like weary travelers to a warm hearth. They are the ones who also crave depth, who think in metaphors, who see symbols in their dreams, who ask why. Before they ask how much, these people are out there, and they are searching just as desperately for someone like you, someone who makes them feel less alone in their thoughts, less alien in their truth, less broken in their beauty. But they will only find you if you stop hiding. So let the world misunderstand you. Let them call you too serious, too emotional, too intense. Smile gently to yourself and go even deeper. This world needs you. Not the filtered you, not the toned down you, not the agreeable, smile-on-demand version of you. It needs your rawness. It needs your inconvenient questions. It needs your comfortable silence. It needs your courageous heart. Carl Jung believed that only when individuals transform themselves can society truly evolve. And who transforms society? Not the loudest, not the richest, not the trendiest, but the most conscious. The ones who dare to go within and come back with light. That is you. So stop asking for permission to be real. Stop waiting for the world to assign you your value. Start valuing yourself so deeply and so fiercely that others have no choice but to rise to meet you or to leave. And know that both outcomes are a blessing. Because deep thinking was never about being liked. It was always about being true. True to yourself, true to your soul, true to your reason for being here.